the real Aileen Wuornos is not a serial killer. I was so lost.
Aileen Wuornos has been called everything from America's first female serial killer to a monster born of madness. But when Netflix recently released its documentary on her life, Aileen, the Queen of Serial Killers, it left out a shocking number of brutal, fascinating truths. Beyond the mugshots and murder headlines lies a story built on generational trauma, betrayal, and a descent that started long before her first kill. From a childhood steeped in abuse to a twisted media circus that followed her to death row, there's far more to Wuornos than the surface-level narrative of a killer gone rogue. Today, we're digging into the 10 most shocking details about Aileen Wuornos Netflix decided to ignore. Before we get too deep into this video, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Her biological father was a serial child abuser. You know, when we talk about Aileen Wuornos, most people zero in on her crimes and those wild mugshots, but there's something the Netflix doc barely touches upon, and that's her dad, Leo Dale Pittman. The man wasn't just out of the picture, he was a total monster in his own right. Pittman was locked up for molesting children and ended up taking his own life in prison before Aileen was even a year old. So, right from the jump, she had this legacy of darkness swirling around her. Then she grew up with relatives who weren't any better. Her grandma was abusive, her grandpa was an alcoholic. It's wild how much these early horrors shape someone, but the documentary kind of skips how her dad's criminal past set the stage for all the chaos that followed. It's like she never even got a chance at normal. So next time you hear about her rampage, remember, a monster made a monster. Pregnant at 14, then forced out. Here's one of the most messed up parts of Aileen's story that never gets the airtime it deserves. When she was just 14, she was raped by a 60-year-old family friend, and if that weren't horrific enough, she ended up pregnant, had the baby in secret, then her family made her give it up for adoption. Within months, her life completely flipped. She was kicked out of her house by her own grandfather, left to fend for herself in the harshest way possible. The Netflix documentary mentions her tough childhood, but kind of breezes past these twisted details, which play a major part in the spiral that followed. Imagine being a kid and the people you depend on just toss you out after something so traumatic. That's next-level cruelty. This is the stuff that sits between the lines and makes you wonder how anyone could come out the other side sane. Arson, armed robbery, and car theft rap sheet. Everyone thinks of Wuornos as the Florida highway murderer, but she didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Way before she started targeting men, Aileen was racking up charges like it was her part-time job. We're talking arson, armed robbery, car theft, check fraud, and a whole bunch of other minor stuff. Seriously, the list is long. Even when you look into court records, you'll see she spent plenty of time bouncing in and out of jail for these non-homicide crimes. The documentary tells you she had it rough, but it dodges the rap sheet, which exposes how she basically lived outside the law for years. The chaos she brought to her own life was almost a trial run for the mayhem to come. If you want to know what made her tick, you gotta look at the trouble she was in before things really went sideways. America's first female serial killer? Not quite. It's wild how every headline screams that Wuornos was America's first female serial killer, but here's where things get funky. She wasn't the first. Even way back in the 1800s, women like Lavinia Fisher and Nanny Doss were accused or convicted of serial killing. So why does the Netflix doc let the myth ride? Well, because the media loved her story, and it was bloody, chaotic, and just unusual enough to shock people. The history books beg to differ, but her case had all the TV drama to make her infamous. The documentary kinda nods to her being unique, but forgets to mention that she was riding a media-made legend, not an actual historical first. Makes you wonder how much is fact and how much is Hollywood. Legal adoption by a fanatic stranger. Another wild twist the Netflix doc barely covers is how Aileen Wuornos, while sitting on death row, got legally adopted by a total stranger. Arlene Prowl, a born-again Christian, randomly wrote her letters, got to know her, and ended up being her spiritual guru and adopted mom. Prowl was super vocal, went on talk shows, and made herself the spokesperson for Wuornos' soul. However, some people think Prowl was more interested in fame than saving Wuornos. The documentary showcases Prowl, but the whole vibe of how weird it was barely gets a look. It's like Aileen's tragic circus just kept growing even behind bars. When you see how Prowl ended up handling Wuornos' legacy, you've got to ask, is this genuine compassion or just another chapter in a totally bizarre story? schizophrenia, paranoia, and deteriorating mental health. Now, everyone's heard about Aileen Wuornos' wild statements towards the end of her life, but let's get specific. The woman was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and several experts have long believed she showed severe signs of schizophrenia and paranoia. Her prison time was marked by constant rants about government plots, weird food poisoning claims, and an obsession with hidden conspiracies. Wuornos was convinced that the prison staff were trying to kill her, and even her court appearances included insane outbursts about sonic attacks and mind control. Psychologists like Dr. Jethro Toomer, who evaluated her, found a pattern of mini psychotic episodes, bursts of delusion, and total emotional instability. It's not an overstatement to say her mental state was in freefall by the end, reinforced by decades of trauma, violence, abandonment, and substance abuse. These aspects get a quick nod in most documentaries, but the sheer daily intensity of her mental unraveling rarely makes it to the screen. This chaotic mind was as much a part of her serial killer story as any weapon or crime scene. Florida governor delayed her execution for mental health reviews. Wuornos' final days weren't just about waiting on death row. Did you know Governor Jeb Bush actually put a pause on her execution just days before it was supposed to go down? This wasn't about sympathy, though. Florida law says the state can't go through with the death penalty if they suspect the person is mentally incompetent at the time. Wuornos' parole board and team of psychiatrists were thrown into a last-minute scramble, combing through her bizarre rants and erratic behaviors to figure out if she even knew what was happening. The stay of execution made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Skeptics said that the move was just a PR play or legal maneuver, not a real shot at saving her life. Still, it's wild to realize that even at the very end, it was Wuornos' mental state, more than her crimes, that nearly paused her execution. Most people miss the details of this legal limbo, even though it says a lot about her story and America's legal system. Her first marriage to a wealthy stranger. Here's something you might miss in the history books. At just 20 years of age, Aileen Wuornos married Louis Gratz Fell, a wealthy 69-year-old yacht club president. It was Florida in the 70s, and this marriage lasted barely a few weeks before Louis shut it down. Wuornos brought chaos wherever she landed, from bar brawls to legal fights, and it was clear she was clashing with his upper-crust lifestyle, and police were already familiar with Aileen from her violent blow-up in a local bar. Fell filed for annulment after claiming repeated assaults and threats. The whole episode feels like something ripped from a soap opera. A young, notorious woman fresh out of jail shocks everyone by coupling up with a rich older guy, only for it to explode in scandal. Somehow, none of this makes it into Netflix's account, and it's a window into how Wuornos always teetered between crimes, survival, and truly bizarre choices. Aileen Wuornos' claims of 400 male clients. Wuornos' life as a sex worker on the highways gets a mention in every doc, but not enough attention goes to the sheer scale of it. Judge Gail Graziano, who had access to court records and testimony, said that Wuornos once estimated she'd seen 400 male clients during the period she was active as a prostitute. That's not just high risk, it's survival on a surreal level, pitching her into the path of hundreds of strangers in cars and motels and isolated Florida woods. This number gives some real perspective to her crime spree and makes you wonder, in a world like hers, how many times she dodged death before anyone even knew her name. Netflix skips right over the numbers, and honestly, it makes the danger she lived with every day feel even heavier. Strong man-hater label, but it wasn't true. The press loved calling Aileen Wuornos a man-hater, saying she was just out for revenge and lashing out at all men, but interviews and letters suggest something way more complicated. Wuornos herself said that she didn't actually hate men universally. She always insisted the murders were about protecting herself from assault and abuse during gone-wrong sex work hustles, not an act of vengeance or some wild anti-man agenda. In fact, she had relationships with men before, sometimes even described them as good people, and the man-hater myth was really just built for the headlines. The documentary barely addresses this. Real life is always more complicated than TV, and Wuornos' case is proof. Sometimes a label is just the easy way out for an ugly, naughty truth. Marvelous verdict. That brings us to the end of this video. Netflix's take on Aileen Wuornos paints her as a broken woman turned monster, but that version only scratches the surface. The reality is a horrifying portrait of systemic failure, generational darkness, and psychological decay. Wuornos was shaped, scarred, and ultimately consumed by the chaos she grew up in. From her father's crimes to her own paranoia-filled final days, every piece of her life screams tragedy more than terror. And maybe that's what makes her story so haunting. In the end, the line between the two completely disappears. If you found these hidden truths eye-opening, hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind pop culture's darkest legends. We'll see you in the next one.